Hello, everybody. The Torah informs us that after the flood, Noach begins, Vayachal Noach Isha Adama. Noach, the man of the land, begins, Vayita Karam, and he planted a vineyard. There's a very interesting medrash, Amar Brechia, Chaviv Moshe mi Noach. Moshe Rabbeinu was more beloved than Noach, obviously, in the eyes of Hashem. Noach, Misha Nikra Ish Sadik, Nikra Ish Adama. Noach, who at the beginning of our parsha is referred to as a man who was a tzaddik, is at the end of the parsha in our pasuk referred to as an earthy individual, Ish Adama. Aval Moshe, Misha Nikra Ish Mitzri. Moshe, who at first is referred to as that Egyptian man, Nikra Ish Elokim, he ultimately is referred to as the man of God. Meshech Chachma tries to explain this medrash in a very beautiful way. And he says, there are two ways that one can approach his avodat Hashem. One way, the first way, is he's miyached atzmo. He dedicates himself exclusively la'avodato, in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, umit boded, and he separates himself from other people in order to be focused exclusively on avodas Hashem. But the second approach is Misha Osek B'tzarchei Tzibur, someone that dedicates himself in the service of the community, umevatel atzmo bishvil haklal. He prefers the needs of the tzibur, the needs of the many, of the community, over his own selfish interests, umafkir nafsho ba'atzmo, and he's willing to make that personal spiritual sacrifice in the service of the klal. Now, l'chora, if one wants to ascend in avodas Hashem, it would appear that the first approach is the way to go, to be fully dedicated to the service of Hashem, to Ruchnius, and thereby to ascend mala mala, as opposed to the second approach, where one is going to make personal sacrifices in terms of his own spirituality, religiosity, if you will, in favor of being of service and utility to the community at large. And we see this in a medrash on a pasuk in Kohelet, where Kohelet Rabbah tells us on the pasuk Ki ha'oshek Yeholel Chacham, that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi testifies, Shmonim halachot lamadati mi Yehuda ben Pedaya becharishat hakever. I had learned 80 different halachos pertaining to the forming, the hewing of a grave from Rabbi Yehuda ben Pedaya. Va'ayidei shehayisi asuk b'tzarchei rabim, and because I involved myself and dedicated myself to the needs of the many, of the community, shchachtim, I forgot those halachas. I was too involved with communal needs. So we see that l'chora, the second approach of communal involvement, as opposed to personal detachment in one's own personal endeavors to serve Hashem, the second way is likely to come at the expense of one's spiritual improvement. Here comes what the Meshech Chachma says. Noach was l'chora the first type of individual. He separated himself from the community. Chazal tell us, because of the fact that while Noach was aware of all of the iniquity of his generation, nonetheless, he failed to be Mochiach Esarabim. He failed to educate, to cajole, to inform, to instruct, to implore the people to improve their ways. He didn't get involved with the community. He was involved only with his own spiritual self-growth. And therefore, what do we read about Noach? The Medrash tells us he was worthy of being killed himself for failure to be involved with the community. So he took the first approach. And nonetheless, what happens? The man who at first was called the Ish Tzaddik, Tamim Haya B'dorotav, is ultimately simply that earthy individual. He went down in his level of spirituality, in his level of Avodat Hashem. He became a mere Ish Adamah. On the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu seems to take the second approach, being involved with the community. When an Egyptian is taking advantage of a fellow Jew, Moshe steps in. He didn't stay in the Beis Medrash and just work on his own learning and self-improvement spiritually. And then when two Jews are going at it, Moshe Rabbeinu again steps in, to the point where he becomes a wandering individual, whom the daughters of Yitro describe as an Ish Mitzri, some exiled Egyptian, someone of a very low sense of spirituality. And yet at the end in the Zot HaBracha Shebeirach Moshe Ish HaElokim, he rose in spirituality. He rose in his achievements until he reached the lofty level of being called an Ish HaElokim. And to that, the Meshech Chochmah points out, the Medrash says, which way is better? Chaviv Moshe Minoach. The lesson is obvious and clear. Shabbat Shalom.